Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you for making the journey here from Brooklyn, right? Was the train ride a mess or magical?
No, I appreciated the time that I got to have on the train. Was definitely pushing out some work.
Okay.
I was getting my just start moment on the train. So I appreciate the good train ride. It was peaceful.
Excellent. Okay. Can I just jump straight to it?
Let's get to it.
Pass all the fluff. And
Yeah.
as you all know, I'm not a fluff kind of chick. Everybody's bios are in the briefing book. Y'all can read. Google exists. I want to know out the gate, why Chick-fil-A?
All right. So so I'm from Atlanta, birthplace of Chick-fil-A. Ironically, growing up, I knew nothing about the Chick-fil-A brand. And so, in fact, we just got a Chick-fil-A on my side of town, maybe late 2014, early 2015. And so I actually got my start my sophomore year. I graduated from Alabama State University, historical black college and university in Montgomery, Alabama.
You're just going to go here more, Alabama State, blah, blah, blah. Okay,
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean, I have to represent Alabama State
I
University.
support you. I support you.
Well, thank you. Because when we teach class, the world takes note. So
Oh, my
there you go. Thank you. Thank you. Got a fellow Hornet in the
Give
house.
them an inch.
So,
Give them an inch.
But I hope y'all taking notes because we got some good things to talk about today.
yes.
But so essentially, I was already in the quick service space. I was working at some of our other competitors. We're not going to name them, but eventually I had a good frat brother of mine. I'm also part of Alpha Phi Alpha, and came through the. Yeah, okay, all right. So I had a frat brother of mine. Yo, B, Chick-fil-A across the street is looking for a marketing director. You should go and apply. And I was like, brother, I'm not trying to build a career out of fast food. I'm trying to stay focused, go to law school, then go work on Wall Street. That was my whole game plan. And so he kept applying the pressure. And I said, okay, all right. I was an overnight supervisor. I'm at Taco Bell. So I was overnight supervisor at Taco Bell. So I walked across the street, applied at the Chick-fil-A. So here's what attracted me right out the gate. The owner, operator, and the management team said, okay, cool, we see your resume. We also don't believe it, but we're going to put you through 5 interviews just so we can start you off as a team member. And so if you know anything about me, my personality and character, and just my upbringing, I love a good challenge. And so I said, okay. So never mind the experience that I have, but you want me to start off as a team member. Got you. I'm going to show you better than I can tell you. So the marketing director role, needless to say, I didn't get. I started off as a regular team member. And from there, just started to work my way up. But really didn't imagine that I was going to be sitting here leading and owning one of the highest performing restaurants today. So thank you. And that's honestly, that's by the grace of God. Like I gotta give honor to God, because as we continue to unfold this story, there are just so many instances that are aligned in my journey that I couldn't possibly have put this together myself. And so I was just so grateful for the learning experiences that I've gotten with Chick-fil-A, just to continue to grow from there. So right after I graduated undergrad, I moved, drove 14 hours straight, gave up a free master's to start a brand new life in Chicago, to help start the Chick-fil-A market there. Got my MBA, and then once I completed my MBA, that's when I joined Chick-fil-A corporate, where for 3 years I traveled across the countries to partner with franchise owners and help them launch their businesses. And so even then, the light bulb still didn't go off. It was only until someone else planted the seed and said, Brandon, eventually Chick-fil-A is going to go to New York. And so I'm like, what? Are you serious? And so I was like, okay, God, you got a funny way of coming back around. I said, so is this my opportunity to go to New York? I just may be selling chicken and not practicing law. So that's my story with Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. So New York is where you're at now, in
Yeah.
Brooklyn.
Mhm.
The only Chick-fil-A in Brooklyn,
The
correct?
only one.
Right across from the Barclays Center, right? They be doing numbers. We went, y'all. Yeah. But you made a stop, okay? You made a stop in Baltimore,
Yes.
okay? Tell me about how that stop came to be,
Okay.
right? And just tell me what you picked up at that stop in order before you made your transit to now your New York stop?
Okay, so you asking me to tell you the details of my Chick-fil-A journey?
Or is that a problem?
No, I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
All right.
Okay, so Chick-fil-A. We all know Chick-fil-A is from the South, typically suburban. I'm pretty sure most of you are accustomed to the drive-through, sitting in the big line, the long lines. Well, what I realized sitting in business school in undergrad was, one, they quite weren't in neighborhoods in which I grew up. And so I said, hey, if I'm going to go down this path, I want to make sure that I can show up in places where individuals look like me, and I'm able to provide opportunities for individuals who may have the same walk of life like me. And so once I started getting into the interview process, our concept, my particular concept, so I forgot to mention this, and maybe this is a little pat on the back, but we do what we do in sales performance with no drive-through. So all foot traffic that comes into the restaurant, right? No cars. I mean, it's New York. Where are you going to put a drive-through?
Yeah.
And so when I was 24, 25, when I kind of said, okay, I'm going to make the decision to go down this path and just start. And we didn't have any stores in New York at all. And I remember when I found out that we were going to go to New York, I went to my boss, because at this time I was on corporate side, and I said, I'm going to be the first one to go to New York. At 24, didn't have a clue, never owned a business, but I said, okay, I'm your guy. So I went through a series of interviews, and it finally boiled down to, Brandon, we think you're competitive long term, but we need to see you own a business first. We need to see what you can do. And so at the age of 26, I opened my first franchise in downtown Baltimore. So some of you may be familiar with the Chick-fil-A in the Harbor. So I opened that in 2015. And 2 weeks right after we opened, that's when we were faced with the Freddie Gray uprising. And so talk about your whole world just like somebody walked into a room and cut the lights off. And so what I realized from that perspective, that was God really saying, hey, I need you to go to Baltimore and get this experience of owning and operating in a setting in which there are some challenges, right? But I need to be able to prepare you for what's greater. And so I was grateful for that in hindsight, because I spent almost 5 years in Baltimore preparing to go to Brooklyn. So, but let me also tell y'all what's so unique about that journey and story. Brooklyn wasn't even on the top of my mindset. I was gunning for everything that looks glittery, right? And there's a lesson behind that, because I was trying to go for the stores in Manhattan, right? And so what do you guys think happened in the pandemic? Every single store in Manhattan saw almost a 60 to 70% reduction in their sales volume. And what do you think was happening with my store in Brooklyn? Increase was going up. But what God was saying was, I needed to prepare you for this first, for where you were going. And so I was grateful for that, because I was upset. Most of the time I was like, man, I wanted them Manhattan stores. But what I realized, also understanding the market, Brooklyn, just the location, right? And the anchorage of the residential population is what was able to sustain us during the pandemic. And we just kind of took off from there. And so I'm extremely grateful for that.
You already know there won't be a time when I ask you on stage or ask you in a public forum where we don't talk about the hard stuff, the mistakes, okay? You told me the wins from Baltimore. If you could revisit that, what would you do differently? What did you not do so well at during your stop and your time in Baltimore?
Yeah, so we talked about this. One of the things that I would go back and do differently was, I'm such a charger. I see things, and sometimes I take the head down approach. And I wish I would have leveraged relationships a little bit more, because I was already telling myself, hey, this is a temporary stop. But what I was doing with that was I was really putting up mental barriers in my mind, which prevented me from building deeper relationships in Baltimore. And so that's one of the things that I would go back and do a little bit differently. But I also had to learn a little bit about, sometimes I get this tendency of the Superman syndrome, meaning, hey, you want to go in and save everyone, you want to go in and give everyone an opportunity, and very quickly realize that wasn't what was best for the business. And so the light bulb also switched when I said, I got to get focused on the team members who want to be poured into. Because I walked into Baltimore saying, yeah, I'm going to save everybody, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity. And it was really weighing on me in some of the decisions that either I made or I didn't make in that particular time. So that would be some of the things that I would go back and do differently. But it's very challenging.
We started most of your journey at ASU. Like, we didn't talk about anything younger.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything that was happening earlier in your life that planted any type of seed where entrepreneurship was even on your mind in any shape, form, or fashion?
Yeah. So I grew up single mom. You know, my mom, when I was born, my mom was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. So she was told that she would only live to see me turn the age of 5. Gratefully, I had my mom with me till I was the age of 12. So she passed away when I was 12. But while she was placed on permanent disability, things around the household was just very tight. And growing up in the city of Atlanta, you had 2 choices: you either hustled or you became victim to what was going on in the streets. And so I decided that I was going to help bring additional income in the household and provide and help my mother. And so one day she had this huge jar of dill pickles. And I don't know what overcame me, but I decided to take those dill pickles and sell them to my friends in the neighborhood. And so, I was like 10 years old. And so,
wait, what are the size of these dill pickles?
I'm talking about, y'all know the big juicy dill pickles that I'm talking about. Like, right, yeah, you dip them in a salt and vinegar chip bag.
I have a lot of questions here.
Know,
Were they in paper towel? Were they in Ziploc bags? Like, what was the package? What was the experience?
in the big jar. So you would have to take them out the big jar and put them in the little penny plastic bag. Come on.
I'm just getting clarity. I just want to know the details for the people.
So I decided at the age of 10 that I was going to take those pickles. And sell them to my friends in the neighborhood. So my mom comes home. She's all upset. We're standing in the front of the refrigerator, and she's like, Brandon, first of all, why you calling my name? I got an older brother, but you called my name first. So it was like she already knew that I did it.
That you was out here selling pickles.
Yeah. So she said, well, what happened to my pickles? I said, well, Mom, I sold them to my friends in the neighborhood. And she said, well, how much did you sell them for? And I said, 50 cents. Next thing I know, she said, wow, as big as those pickles were, you could have at least sold them for $1. Yeah. And so all I remember from that day was chasing my friends down the street saying, hey, my mom said you owe me 50 cents more for those pickles. So what that did, that actually gave us the idea to become the neighborhood candy lady. Yes. So when you talk about like that earlier entrepreneurial spirit, I got my start at a very young age. So much so that curiosity kept growing and growing. I had this green hard shell Ninja Turtles lunchbox. And right before I would run out the door to catch the school bus, I would grab a handful of like candy, blow pops, whatever, and stick it in that lunchbox. And I would sell it at school. And so I love the independence that I was getting from that, so much so that by the time I graduated high school, I had 2 people working for me and was doing over $300 a day in sales. So I literally was like the walking vending machine.
Listen, let me tell you something. Who else had a high school or middle school hustle?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking about my husband. Honey, raise your hand. Mark had a whole empire in Southwest Detroit of layers of people selling candy for him when he was growing up.
Yeah.
That was the hustle.
Like there was nothing that you couldn't have gotten from me that you got in the vending machine.
Okay.
I literally had honey buns, hot Cheetos, frozen Capri Suns, and I had a whole system, y'all. Talking about, because I'm a systems kind of guy,
Yeah.
I had a whole infrastructure. So one of my best friends, he's no longer with us. He actually passed away a month before I opened my restaurant in Baltimore, and his daughter is my goddaughter. And so I didn't have a car. I told you guys how I grew up or whatever. So in high school, he would take me to Sam's Club. And in exchange for him giving me a ride, because I had to go up and re-up every single day. That's how much business we were doing. So in exchange, I would tutor him in math. So that's how I kept my costs low. I also had a whole system to where I'm very big on customer experience. And so I would get up at 2 a.m. in the morning to pull the Capri Suns and Kool-Aid pouches out of the freezer just so that they could start thawing. By the time I got to the bus stop, you had a nice cold Capri Sun or Kool-Aid. But I think that was the nature that was already instilled. I always give credit to my family because although we may not have had much, what we did have was work ethic. And I was able to pick up from that. And so it was a hustle. Yeah.
We talked about one of the challenges that you had in Baltimore, right? But let's just talk overall. If I had to ask you, what is one of the biggest mistakes that you made in your starting journey? What is that? I'll take more than one if you have it as well.
One, thinking that I knew it all, and not from a perspective of, oh, I'm cocky or like no one can tell me anything, but I had put in a lot of time at Chick-fil-A before opening my very first restaurant. And so I had this folder. I said, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, and had all my plans written out. And day one when we opened the restaurant, I'll never forget it. Day one when we opened the restaurant, and it's live now, right? There's no turning back. And I was like, okay, I got to throw that out the window. I got to throw that out the door. This plan is not going to work. And so that was probably one of the biggest mistakes for me, was thinking that I got to a point to where I arrived. And entrepreneurship is never on a journey where you have arrived, but maybe you can celebrate a milestone. It's okay to, like live in that moment, but you can't get content. You can't become complacent. And so I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that I had made, which kind of put my launch behind the curve a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that you're here with us today. It's Saturday, right?
Which will probably be my busiest day.
Okay. It's probably nice. If it's nice here, typically it's nice in New York as well.
And
right?
it's graduation season.
Graduation season. You're crossing the Barclays, right? On average, you're doing how many sales a day, you think, on a good day? Wow.
I ain't gonna give you I ain't gonna give you specifics.
Okay.
I'll tell you it's north of 50.
North of 50,
per day.
50,000.
Yes.
Okay, 50,000 transactions.
Well, okay. So transaction, I can tell you.
Okay.
So.
Oh, you were talking dollars.
Yeah.
I was not talking dollars.
Okay.
I wasn't even asking you dollars.
Okay. So I serve on average 3,600 guests per day.
Okay. It's a heavy day for you.
Heavy day.
You're here. You're not in your store. How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel proud.
Okay.
Amazing. It's empowering. Because it gives me an opportunity to just start, not literally being here, but to be able to just start on some other initiatives and things. But I also have 135 employees with a leadership team of 20 plus. And so even at 135, I still don't have enough team members.
Yeah.
And so still continue to looking to grow that. But I have some really good young men and women that afford me the opportunity to come out and do things like this because they understand the clear vision that I set, but they also understand my passion to be able to give back to the community through avenues and channels like this.
I want to dig there just a little bit, but first, I think it's great that you have 135 employees. I think that it's great that you're able to hear and be here, and you entrust, or you entrust really the growth of the store and the stability of the store to your leaders. Tell me about that journey of trust that you had to establish, and how challenging or easy has it been in building up this team? And here's why I ask this, right? Lots of us are starting or scaling or growing, and at some point, many of us want to bring on people, support, so that you're not doing it all, so you're not crashing and burning, right?
Yeah.
And so for you, of course, the way that Chick-fil-A is structured, you have to have a team. Like, you can't be on the fries and the milkshakes and all the other stuff.
Although I tried it.
But, you know, it ain't going to work out, right? So tell me about that journey of growing the team, making sure that you have trust in them. What has been that journey of growing your team overall?
Ooh, a lot of trial by error.
Okay.
And so what I realize is it starts with the simple systems that you're able to replicate. A lot of times people make the assumption that, oh, you're buying into a franchise. Oh, it's Chick-fil-A. They're going to give you all of the tools and the resources. That's not how the deal works, right? Especially when it comes to people. What my agreement gives me the rights to do is utilize the name, utilize the recipes, and it gives me facility and building infrastructure. Everything else in between, which is probably the most important piece, the people piece, good luck. You're on your own. And so for me, I had to go in and say, okay, I realized the risk that I assume every single day, every single chicken sandwich that goes across that counter, guess who's responsible? Me. Guess what risk I carry? All of it. And so if I want to make sure that I'm doing the best of my ability to hedge that risk and reduce and lower that risk, I have to make sure that I have really good systems in place, and that starts with the people piece. And so I had to really sit down and look at myself in the mirror and say, what is it that you're really good at? And then whatever that you're not good at, you have to hire to that. And so I know that because I'm a Mustang. So Mustangs, we like to run free, wild, untamed. And so sometimes that also means we may forget details, right? I'm the one that's standing in the midst of the fire saying, yeah, let's run towards it. But I also know that I need someone to be like, are you sure that that's safe? Like, have you calculated, do we have all of the necessary support systems? And so once I realized that, I made sure that I was strategic and tactful in identifying individuals around that. And so that's system around the people piece. But then you talk about trust. In order for me to build that infrastructure, I realized there was a lot of things that I also could not do. And from a leadership perspective, we have to look at it from the lens of, if my goal is to show up for the team that's counting on me, I have to have the capacity to do that. So how do you create more capacity? You gotta delegate. And what comes with delegation? Trust. But how you strengthen that trust is, are you clear in the expectations? And oftentimes what I come across when I'm talking to other entrepreneurs is, we don't know what we need. And it's important that we spend time sitting down, understanding what our needs are, and being able to articulate what those needs are. Because if we know how to do those two things, then we know how to appropriately go out and either ask for that or find opportunity and or people to help bridge that gap. So that's one of the things that I had to work on in terms of trust. And really, like, my team ranges from the 17-year-old all the way up to the 50, 60-year-old individuals who have retired, but they don't want to sit at home, and so they still need something to do. And so I have to make sure that I'm very clear in letting them know, like, here's the vision, but then here's exactly what I need you to do. And it's your responsibility to figure out how to execute it, because that's just my leadership style. I've spent a lot of time understanding how I lead and knowing that it's important for me to assemble a team around me based on my leadership style.
We've talked about team quite a bit today, right? Just in the last few minutes. I, of course, have had an experience with working in QSR, right? Quick serve restaurants. And many of you also have. Who's worked in fast food before? QSR at some point in your life, all right? And in a lot of QSR type situations, you are a number, right? You are here to do this job, execute that job, go home, right? I know from having conversations with you and just the type of leader that you are that you think a bit beyond that, right? You're thinking like, how can I support people beyond just come here, do this particular task? Why? You could be I got a job to get done, I have money to make, this store has to sustain itself. You could be that guy, but I know you're not.
Yeah.
Why do you care beyond that?
One, I think about my own upbringing, right? Again, I talk about growing up, resources were limited, but I also remember those individuals who came in my community and provided resources that weren't necessarily accessible, whether that was through the Salvation Army, the Boys and Girls Club, or any other type of community organization that was providing and bridging those gaps. And I realized in this industry, because of some of the same things that you said, most people do look at it as dead-end jobs and opportunities. But for me, it's a necessity that I need these type of employees. And so what I realized, I'll never forget, I had this moment. I had a superstar leader in Baltimore, and she was a single mother. And when she was at work and when she could be at work, she was on fire. But when she had childcare issues or whatever the case may be, not only did she suffer, but guess who else suffered? The store. So I had a choice to make. I said either I could move on and find a different employee, or I can say, how can I help you bridge this gap so that we're both winning? So what I did then was I went to my HR leader and said, hey, I want you to go out into the community and find out how we can better educate our team members on finding childcare support. And really what it was, she just didn't know how to sign up for childcare vouchers. So I said, okay, now that's a part of your responsibility. So when we onboard our team members, I want you to be able to educate them on how they can get plugged in to supporting systems and organizations in the community, because I don't want that to be a barrier for them performing great, right? Because when they're not performing, then we're suffering. So over time, that thesis and that mentality has just morphed into this whole, what I would like to call it as a world-class employee value proposition. And most people don't think about that at the restaurant store level. But what that's enabled me to do is my retention rate at my particular restaurant is consistently 2, 3, 4 points above chain average. Why? Because my team understands that when you come and work with me, this is a holistic approach. In fact, so my vision for my restaurant is to
Hold on, that was my next question.
Oh, okay.
I'm just joking. Go ahead. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
So my vision for my restaurant is to be Brooklyn's most caring company. But how we live out that vision is through our mission, which is to simply love. And so for us, that's an acronym: lead with great taste in food and world-class hospitality, offer opportunities of growth, stability, and exposure to new life experiences, value ourselves and each other, and then embrace our core values of honesty, integrity, commitment, and the pursuit of excellence. But I want to go back to, thank you, but I want to go back to the O in that acronym: offer opportunities of growth, stability, and exposure to new life experiences. People may say, well, okay, what's so significant about that? One, I think back to my childhood experiences, right? I just talked about the different people that planted seeds and that came back into my community, right? They were offering opportunities, they provided stability, and they were exposing me to things beyond my community. And so now all of those things are threaded through almost every single decision factor that we're making for the business. So much so, I have a young gentleman with us leading my organization right now as a 24-year-old. He just turned 24. And he's like my top guy in my organization. And people think he's my son. But guess what? He's been with me since he was a junior in high school in Baltimore. I relocated him from Baltimore to New York. And I said, you got one condition if you want to make this journey with me. You got to finish school. You got to finish college. And so a year and a half ago, he graduated and walked across the stage. And so he's been with me 7 years now. And my commitment to him, he too now wants to be a franchise owner. If he gets selected and Chick-fil-A sees that he's a good qualified candidate, I'm going to pay half of his franchise fees. But I do that for anyone if you make that investment in yourself. And I always tell my team, you got to be able to make those type of investments in yourself so that you show others that you're worthy to be invested in. If you can't make that bet on yourself, then what does it look like for someone else to come in and make that investment in you? So that's so important from a leadership capacity.
You know, one of the questions and one of the conversations that I often have with starters is what happens when they get stuck, right? I get stuck. I started something, I tripped, I fell, oops, I don't know what the answer is. I keep hitting the brick wall. And so I have to ask you the question to create a catalog for other people around what do you do when you get stuck? And this is not for you to carbon copy what Brandon is going to say. Like literally, this is a question that I ask each and every guest who's on our Just Start From Ideas to Action podcast. What do you do when you get stuck? It's not to copy, but it's for you to see like, okay, these are the options of things that other people utilize when they get stuck. And you might have to use this one day and this another day. So I'm curious, what do you do when you get stuck?
Okay. So one, I start with my why, right? I go back and I recall like, well, why did you start this, right? You got to go back and sometimes our light dimmers, right? And so you got to go back and think about, well, what was the why to kind of rekindle that energy that you had? And so, y'all, there are many days where I want to wave a white flag and say, I can't do this anymore. I mean, because working in the restaurant industry is hard. And most people would think it's easy because I work with a highly well-recognized brand. In fact, that makes it harder because y'all don't been to Chick-fil-A. You know the level of customer service to expect. And so that's right. It certainly is. So I got to go back to think about that why on the days that I get stuck and or that I want to quit. But what's often overlooked is the simplicity of having your own self-care routine. We overlook that. But again, this goes back to, like, it may sound cliche, but it's so fruitful in a sense of just having a simple routine of finding clarity, finding peace. I was reading his leadership book last week called Smart Leadership, and he talked about having what we call just like white space, right? And that's an opportunity, intentional opportunity for you to create, plan, strategize, and really, I loved how he broke it down in the book where he talks about that clear space or that white space is not an opportunity for you to go and check emails. It's not an opportunity for you to go and say, let me substitute this time for something else, but it's for you to really sit down and think. Creating intentional time for you to think like that is so important when you get stuck. Like that's actually a slot in my calendar. And you know, from working with me, typically Wednesdays. But the third thing that I do when I get stuck is I call on people like you. Yeah. Seriously, like it's about a community and it helps you bring that back into perspective. You gotta have what they call your trusted advisors, right? Which is key 3 to 4 people around you who you've shared your vision with. They truly support you, but they hold you accountable, right? Your trusted advisor team shouldn't be filled with yes people. Right? People that's just going to agree with everything. Like my friends, we go head to head in a sense of, but I love that sense of passion because they're holding me accountable for understanding where I'm trying to go, what my purpose is and what my why is. So those will be the 3 things that I do or that I try to make sure that I'm intentional on when I get stuck. And I say that because, again, it's so cliche, but y'all, it's so important. It's so important as an entrepreneur. you're not just the innovator of that product or that service. Eventually, even if you have one employee, someone else is counting on you to show up the best version of yourself. That's the essence of leadership. And so you have to be able to figure out ways to show up consistently as the best version of yourself. You got to create time and space for that.
I think about a couple things here. I'm going to pull a couple things out of that. First is on a recent podcast interview I had with Monique Woods, who I mentioned a short while ago, Monique Woods' insurance agency. She talked about, I asked her the same question, what do you do when you get stuck? And she said, I literally just get up from my desk and go outside and go for a walk. I don't finish up the email. I don't make one more phone call. Just get up and go outside and clear your space. And it's amazing how some of the things that you're struggling with, the answer just comes to you just by walking around, just clearing your mind. Yeah. It's also an indication, also if you think about many of us when we're in the shower, clear mind, and you get your best ideas, you're scrambling to get out to write some stuff down, it's the white space.
Yeah. That's actually scientifically proven, right? When you're exercising, all of those, I'm not a scientist, and I hear we got some scientists in here, so I'm not going to try to butcher myself through this, but whatever little chemicals are running through your brain at that time or your body, right, it releases the creative aspect of our brain and our mind. And so to be able to do those things, again, I talk about my Wednesdays, whether I like to bike, so I can 30, 50 miles. I've had some of my best ideas or my best mode of like booster of confidence come in those moments. And it's reinvigorating in those times. So I wholeheartedly agree. You just got to be able to say, all right, let me go get some fresh air. Whatever your routine is, that's important.
And then the other thing I wanted to pull out that's worth talking about is your bench of resources. Some people call it a personal board of directors. Some people call it mentors. I always recommend that you strive to have at least 4 people in your circle, okay? A coach, an educator, a cheerleader, which is the easiest to have. It's easy to get a cheerleader. It's easy for me to say, Brandon, good job. Sean, good job. Siobhan is fantastic. It's a little bit harder to say, good job, Jan, but here's where I want you to improve, right? It takes more effort, but it's magic in the entrepreneurship space when someone can say, hey, I care about you. I want the best for you. Here is where you have the opportunity to up level. So you don't want all yes people in your circle. You want somebody that is open and honest that can say, here's where you can do a little bit better. All right, so the 4 people in your circle. I am really curious about how you now maintain community while we're talking about circles and boards of directors. And I ask this because the 2023 Just Start Summit is almost over, right? And of course, I'm going to email you some more. I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to borderline stalk you to make sure that you're going to do what you said you were going to do. But it requires community. It requires you to take the effort to connect with people, right? And sometimes it's hard, right? It's almost like making new friends, making new entrepreneur friends all over again, right? And that friend that you had back from 10th grade who was not trying to be an entrepreneur might not be it. You might need new people, all right? How do you establish a meaningful circle, a meaningful network, and how do you sustain that community now, considering that you're busy, you're intentional? Like, what's the sauce?
Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of hit the nail on the head. It comes with the level of intentionality. So one of the mindsets that I used to have growing up, you know, you hear people say, oh, pencil me in and all of this stuff. I used to think, oh, that's bougie. You got to plan and pencil your family members in and all of this kind of stuff. But if you remember earlier, I said it's about creating capacity. And so if I wanted to be intentional about making sure I stay connected with a community, I have to do that through my calendar, right? And that creates better organization for me. And now it's something standing, and I plan for it. Versus if I don't plan for it, you can become so busy. Life is busy, right? And so you gotta make sure that you're staying super intentional about those things. Even if it's hey, can I call you every other Friday? It's just 10, 15 minutes, just thinking about you, what's going on, what do you got going on in your world? I've had to learn at that. You've helped me with that. You've given me some tools, resources, but you've also said, hey, it's okay to to not feel like you got to return every phone call or that you got to show up to every event, because then you're stretching yourself thin. And so from that perspective, sometimes giving yourself that grace and understanding that circle may change, that community may change. So I understand what my capacity is. I understand what my limits are. So I just try to be more intentional about that community. But for me, it's about planning that on my calendar so that I can do it. And the person on the other end doesn't necessarily have to know, right? But they also are not walking in your shoes of how busy you are. And that was one of the things that I had to learn about my group of friends and or new relationships that I was starting to form and build, is really just about saying what the expectations are and what you can give and how you can show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about proud moments. Okay, so we've been connected for several years now. And it wasn't until this, most recently, that I saw or heard the words come out of your mouth that the Chick-fil-A Brooklyn store is one of the top performing stores across the country. Like, you've never said it, never wrote it, super humble about it, right? Don't ever look at us, look at what we're doing, right? I know for many reasons. I'm going to ask you another question, right? In that family of thinking, what are you most proud of on your starting journey?
That wasn't in the lineup.
I know it wasn't in the lineup.
Oh, I mean, what am I most proud of? You know, there's can it be several things?
Yes.
Okay.
You go from I don't got nothing to
Yeah.
I got many, right?
I mean, okay, so we could talk about, I was the first to open Baltimore City's first Chick-fil-A.
Which is a really big deal. It's a really big deal. Yeah.
Then fast forward, open Brooklyn's first Chick-fil-A. I also didn't say, from how many of y'all Uber Eats, you sitting at home, you DoorDash? Well, I am Uber Eats' busiest restaurant in their platform in the entire world. So that's something to be proud of. I'm proud that I purchased my first multi-unit home in New York, which houses some of my employees at affordable housing rates.
Can we just stop there for a second? Because that is the reason why I asked the question earlier about, you could just employ people to do their work, right, and go home, but you think bigger. You have this multi-unit investment property that your employees stay at an affordable rate so that they can have a respectable place to live. So also so that the business does well, because the business got to do well, right?
Yeah.
And it's not common that people are thinking in that way. Yeah. I need to remind you of that. Like, because you're like, oh, let me add this on. Like, it's sort of kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
But I am.
I know. Any other proud moments? We're here for them.
Yeah. What else? Have I shared them with you? What am I missing?
What? I don't know. Any other proud moments?
Y'all, it's really hard for me to talk about. I think that's it.
That's it.
For right
Okay.
now. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can think of like.
No. You got one. If another one comes up, you have to tell us.
Yeah, if another one comes up, I'll share it. But no, I'm just grateful because it's a lot of good blessings and overflow that has come from this journey when I didn't even think that any of this would be possible.
Yeah.
So,
if someone is thinking, you know what, maybe I'll consider a franchise opportunity because it wasn't on my mind, I was gonna go a completely different route. What should people keep in mind if they're considering going down the franchising route?
That's a good question. So, from a franchising perspective, one, Chick-fil-A is not the only franchise, right? Two, franchising in the restaurant industry is not the only franchise model, right? You can franchise Amazon, you can franchise Coke, you could franchise just any other cleaning services and companies. Just think about your capacity and the type of entrepreneur that you want to be. I know that I'm a collaborator, so joining a franchise system is what works best for me. But some of y'all out here are some real deal heavy starters, and that's great. That's your lane. But make sure when you're getting into franchise partnerships that you also understand the values of the franchisor, because I can't stress enough how important that piece of the puzzle is, especially if you're even thinking remotely about the restaurant space. Make sure that you're keeping up with what's going on in legislation. Now they're trying to pass laws across the country that would potentially pair both the franchisee and the franchisor together, and that's not good. That's not a system that you would want, because what that essentially does is strips away the autonomy of the individual franchisee, right? So also, most franchise relationships, I don't care how you change the legal jargon, it's still at the end of the day a partnership. So make sure that you understand who you're getting into business with as the franchisor, because there are going to be some, oops, I didn't know about that. Or there's going to be, oh yeah, we have the right to pass this down to you. So as my grandmother used to say, in all things that you do, make sure that you get an understanding of what it is. So that's what I would say about franchising. And there are several different ways you can finance franchising. There are SBA programs out there. There are actually business loaners specifically catered to the franchising space. So just make sure that you try to tap into some of those resources and get an understanding from there.
Great. Well, I'm very grateful we've spent this time together. I do have one other question.
Okay.
Right. And it is, what's next for you? What's next for you, and what's next for the business?
Ooh.
That was on the list.
That was on the list.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got a lot of just start moments. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been able to sit as a student too. So thank you. I think you did that on purpose so that I can, kind of learn. But I am in the process writing my first published work. And so I want to be able to share that story. I want to continue to grow my real estate portfolio. I am going to get into some of the angel investment and VC space. I made my first investment last month into a company.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to do those things, but I'm also looking at how do I build Brandon J. Hurst brand beyond just like Chick-fil-A, because as I love Chick-fil-A, but y'all ain't trying to sell chicken at 50. I've been in the industry for a long time, since 2008. And so when it comes my time to pass the baton on to someone else, I want to make sure that I got options. I want to make sure that I have options of legacy, but it also stems from my heart and what I feel is my purpose. So got a lot of different things in the works for what's next.
Yeah.
So
there is one last question. How can we support you?
Ooh, one, keep eating Chick-fil-A. No matter where you go, just keep eating Chick-fil-A. But
check and check.
two, I would just say, I told you guys I'm a collaborator. So seeing y'all here, you're already supporting me because you're a part of what I call what's necessary to refuel me. So I think I posted and I said, hey, I want my DC friends to show up, not to support me because they've heard this story many times, but show up to make an investment in you. And I'm extremely proud of each and every one of you in the audience, because on a Saturday where you could be partaking in brunch and mimosas and everything else, y'all are here investing in yourselves. And so that's how you support me, because I get to come to spaces like this and feed off your energy. So I'm appreciative of that. But when I release this book, also make sure you purchase a copy of that. So, and I also like doing speaking opportunities. So if you come across anything, I love high school kids and college. I'm not as gifted talking to the elementary folks. My patience ain't there, but high schoolers.
Leave that to Taria. That's for Taria.
Yeah, there you go. But high schoolers, college, I do speaking engagement, motivational speaking, so you can tap into me for that. I'm everywhere on LinkedIn. You can also follow Chick-fil-A Flatbush and Atlantic, and just stay tuned and continue to support yourself and each other. That's how you support me.
Fantastic. Listen, before we formally close out for today with a couple of other announcements, Brendan, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your talent. Thank you for your treasures. Thank you for the commitment that you make to the entrepreneurship space and other people that are following in your footsteps. And I look forward to you continuing to just start and just start and just start again. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.